I'm delighted you could join us today for this webinar about It's Not Political. For those of you just popping in, we're in the midst of a poll right now to see sort of what your own experience is in terms of how diverse the engagement is. And I'm going to close that poll in just a second and return to the slide deck. It looks like most of the folks have participated. So I'll close that. In the presentation. So I'll make you wait a little bit for those results. We'll pull them up a little bit later. Again, it's terrific to have you here today to talk about It's Not Political. As a little bit of background, Cool Choices is a nonprofit. We work with a variety of businesses and communities across the country to help them encourage individuals to adopt sustainable practices, really in an aim of creating a culture where sustainability is the new normal. And as part of that work, we talk a lot about who's involved and who's not involved. And in those conversations, very often when we're starting with a green team or a sustainability lead in an organization, and I ask about the kind of diversity of folks engaged in the sustainability efforts, the response I'll get is some variation of, well, it's only people on my team because, well, it's political. You know, we can't engage people in a bigger way. It's too complicated. These issues are too controversial. And my aim today is really to push on you on that a little bit, to give you some better fodder to think about, some different tools, to really think differently about the challenge. Because while I acknowledge that issues like climate change are politically controversial and there's all kinds of partisanship around that, if we frame things in a way around sustainability, I think it's pretty clear that sustainability is mainstream and you can leverage that to engage a broader group. And let me start with first sort of how mainstream sustainability is. On the corporate side, this is a recent analysis of the S&P 500 companies that do sustainability reporting. In 2011, just 1 in 5 S&P 500 companies filed a corporate sustainability report. By 2016, that was 8 in 10. 2017 will probably approach close to 9 in 10. So there's a way that at the business side, there's broad recognition that this is an important thing to be addressing. Now, partly why there's broad recognition there is because when you look at institutional investors, about 70% of them look at these reports before they make investment choices. It's very clear to the institutional investor that sustainability is tied to profitability. And of course, business leaders are paying attention to that. So at the top of the kind of corporate hierarchy, there's increasing recognition that this is important. There's also recognition, though, at our base consumer level. This is some new and really fascinating research from the Shelton Group. They do market research and marketing in the environmental space. And they did some research to really understand, okay, in this time when there is so much partisanship, where people don't seem to agree on very many things, what agreement can we find around environmental issues? And essentially they found 3 terms that had a high level of positive ranking: conservation, science, and sustainability. And significantly, of those 3, only sustainability ranked high across all demographics. So it ranked high among men and women, it ranked high among young people and old people, it ranked high among people with high levels of education and less levels of education. It ranked high among people who tend to vote on the left and people who tend to vote on the right. 70% of everybody, every way they cut the deck, had a positive impression of sustainability. That's huge. That's an enormous platform for us to leverage off of when we're trying to engage bigger groups. The final piece is that the employees and the prospective employees inside and on the verge of coming inside your organizations all really want to be part of this. We've talked about this data before. 88% of millennials look for opportunities to be part of their company's environmental efforts. The number is about 74% across the entire workforce. So not only do people view sustainability positively, but there's a hunger there to get to be part of the solution. And yet, we have this challenge that for lots of us, we're mostly still talking to the choir. And here, let me just pull up the the poll we did at the beginning, so you can all see what folks said. So the majority of folks said that when their last event was kind of the usual folks who show up for sustainability things, plus a couple of new faces. That's okay, the choir plus one. Ultimately, where we want to be is much bigger than that. And so really I want to encourage you to reflect on how the way you're framing sustainability might influence this. And then we'll talk about some ways you can change that frame. But to start there, I want to really think for a second about if the way you're framing sustainability might well be prompting people to avoid you. And when I say this, I think about one of the very first sustainability managers we worked with, who at one point shared with me that about 6 months into his job, he realized that when he showed up at interdisciplinary meetings with people from other departments, it wasn't atypical for him to hear someone say, "Uh-oh, Tom's here. He's going to bust you for those water bottles." Or, you're going to get in trouble with Tom for that single-sided copying kind of thing. And he realized he was being perceived as this kind of, sorry, a bit of a cold today, enforcer who was kind of the sustainability police. And nobody really wants the sustainability police at their meeting. It's not that much fun to be scolded about the things you're doing wrong. Even beyond, though, so there's this sort of base scolding. Are we making sure that we're going out there and finding what people are doing right, not what they're doing wrong, to lead with? Broader than that, though, I think, is this issue of how we kind of frame things, too. On environmental issues, we have an unfortunate tendency, we advocates, to have these doom and gloom statistics that we like to share. So my favorite bad example is that 9 out of 10 plastic water bottles are not recycled. As someone who cares about environmental issues, when I say that seems to me like a thing that should motivate people to action. In reality, though, human beings are influenced by social norms, which means we all tend to take cues from other people. Which means that when a regular person hears that 9 out of 10 bottles are not recycled, what they hear is it's okay to not recycle this one. It's really not that big of a deal. One more bottle isn't going to make that much of a difference. So when we're framing things in a negative way that we think might mobilize people to action, what we're actually doing is giving them permission to not act. Sometimes we're making it seem like action is futile. So the framing is critically important. It's a ton of the work we do is really about helping people think about how they frame these things appropriately. And fundamentally, the challenge, is to give people the opportunity to be a hero in their own story. And, I had a striking example of this last week. I was privileged to be part of a group with a healthcare initiative in the Southeast, and there was a facilities manager there who'd been part of a workshop 2 years earlier, where in that workshop, they had an opportunity to sort of think about how their work had bigger influences on the hospital system and healthcare and patients. And he wrote a hero story about how his own efforts to save energy could positively influence patient outcomes. And he really liked his story. At the end of the workshop, they were all supposed to turn their stories in, and he got special permission to take his story home with him, that the instructor photographed it or something instead so that he could have this story. 2 years later, we're back at this system having a conversation, and this same facilities guy has emerged as a really strong leader on energy efficiency. And in the course of talking to him, he shared that story he wrote is posted on his refrigerator at home because he's so proud of what he does. So every day, his wife and kids see that story. That's the kind of thing you want to do in this. You want to give people that opportunity that they're so hungry for, to contribute to the solution, to be part of a purpose-driven organization, to do something really significant. And there are all kinds of ways you can do this. Fundamental to it, though, and we talk about this a lot, it's one of the things that I always hammer on, is positive reinforcement. When you call out someone for doing the right thing, two really important things happen. The person you call out feels compelled to keep doing the right thing, but other people notice and want to be called out, so they start doing the right thing. So you have this ripple effect. You deepen the commitment in the person you called out, and you get some other people acting, which can lead to yet more people acting. And it becomes this really strong, powerful circle. You know, that's fundamental to what we do at Cool Choices. Our program, our online customized program, is really a way to give people the opportunity to kind of raise their hands and go, hey, I did a sustainable thing, and we give them points and we cheer for them. And it's framed as a game, but ultimately we're creating a way to give that positive reinforcement and create that environment where people are celebrating each other doing the right things and talking about that. There are a million ways you can do this. You can do this by encouraging people to take photos of each other doing the right things. You could have a monthly award. And, you know, too often we think, when I say monthly award, you think, oh, I don't have a budget for that. Okay, what I want is for you to go to Goodwill and get some crazy trophy off the kitsch pile there and hand that to people on a rotating basis. And it will work. You'll be creating some buzz and again, you're doing this in a positive frame. You're not talking about what people are doing wrong. You're talking about what they're doing right, and you're building momentum around sustainability. Now, the piece I've focused on so far is really kind of rank and file, frontline staff, how you get them engaged. The other piece of this, we know that's a challenge, is cross-departmental. How do you get the managers of those other departments to see that what you're doing is important? I think we have had experience in a number of organizations where at the top of the C-suite, there's a recognition that sustainability really matters, and there's a sustainability team doing great stuff, but it's really hard to penetrate the other departments. And so a piece of this is also thinking about how you frame sustainability so that it's tied to strategic priorities that other departments understand. And sometimes this is as simple as having them understand that some actions require all hands on deck. So for example, if your organization is committed to zero waste to landfill, there's a piece of that your facilities team or and logistics are going to handle, but there's a piece of that involves everything everyone does in the employee cafeteria. And that's about engaging everyone. And so everyone has to be part of the solution. Similarly, if you're on a quest to be a net zero energy user, there's a piece that's about facilities and the building shell and the operations. But when you get a high performance building, what's left is plug load. And that's about every single person at their workstation. And so everyone needs to be involved. So part of this is to think about how to frame those things so that everybody understands everyone needs to be involved. Sometimes, though, it's about aligning your sustainability efforts with other strategic priorities for the organization. Let me give you a really concrete example here. So we did some work last year in Waukesha County, Wisconsin. For those of you not familiar with Wisconsin, this is a suburb just outside of Milwaukee. Milwaukee's over here, relatively affluent suburb, and quite conservative. In fact, USA Today in 2016 said that Waukesha County was the reddest county in the United States, reflecting their kind of consistent voting pattern for Republican candidates. You wouldn't expect then for Cool Choices to be talking about sustainability in Waukesha County. But the other interesting thing about Waukesha County is that their employment market is really tight. Okay, unemployment is very low there. Businesses are struggling to find and retain talent. And it's a big issue for business. And so we had a conversation there with business leaders about that, about employee recruitment and retention, and the data about millennials wanting purpose-driven work and opportunities to engage around sustainability. And you know, the businesses in Waukesha County were already doing things to reduce their energy use. They just weren't necessarily talking about it or engaging with employees in a broad way on it. With conversations with us at the table, they were really willing, though, to give that a shot. And we did a county-wide program. We engaged more than 500 people across 30-plus organizations. And we help businesses learn how to leverage sustainability to get some of that momentum they needed around recruitment and retention. And as you're thinking about the other departments you have to influence, that's really the thing I would challenge you on. You know, there are a lot of ways sustainability can help an organization. And part of this is thinking about how you frame that for particular departments. So if it seems like sales and marketing isn't that interested in being part of sustainability, you need to talk about the data about what customers want and brand loyalty, and maybe ask the sales team, are they getting questions from some customers about how green your products are, how green your culture is? Because that's a reason for them to be involved and engaged. And so on throughout kind of the organization. You're essentially, ultimately, my argument is that sustainability isn't political. You need to be really savvy about how you frame this so that you maximize participation, both at the sort of rank and file level and at that mid-management level that can be a challenge in some circumstances. And with that, I think I want to open things up for questions. So as you're probably aware, there's the little go to webinar box. You can click on the little orange arrow to make it pop open, and there'll be a spot there where you can enter a question. And I do apologize for this cold today. Apparently one of the non-benefits of going to the Carolinas to participate in a healthcare thing is to bring back a cold with you on the airplane. Terrific. We have a question. How do you know you're reaching beyond the choir? Which is a great question. So I think two things tell me that we're doing that pretty effectively. In the Waukesha example, so we typically do a baseline survey and a post-program survey as part of all of our efforts. And in Waukesha, we added a question to the survey about climate change specifically. So asking for kind of a pulse point on climate change versus sustainability. And what we saw was really interesting, that there was a cohort of people who participated in the Waukesha program who were not at all concerned about climate change, but thought sustainability was important. And so those were not people who were typically engaged with environmental issues. Now, part of what was really interesting for us is those folks also had more savings reported through the program than the average participant, suggesting that the folks that we haven't reached, because maybe our messages were a bit too political in some other instances, had significant savings opportunities and just needed to be engaged in a way that was less partisan and kind of more welcoming. So that was so that's one of my answers. I think the other answer, though, I would say, in a good number of programs we do, when we're doing debriefs with the sustainability team, they'll bring up specific participants in the program and say, I can't believe this person participated. I can't believe these guys did this. I think about a county program we did a number of years ago where one of the winning teams came out of the highway department. And the green team was really stunned that group had participated because they didn't tend to participate in county employee initiatives. It's a sign that you're reaching beyond the choir. In my poll question, I asked you who was coming to your events, and the answers that people provided suggest, people kind of know who's there and who's not. Okay, so hopefully that answers that. I have another question. When your company's culture is focused on sustainability, how can you better engage employees who are not interested in participating in simple sustainable actions? So I would say that's a typical of most of the entities we work with, that they're trying to create that corporate culture, that there are messages from the top, that there's an active green team. Part of this is the sort of reality of groups. So you're probably all familiar with some variation of adoption theory, that you've got kind of early adopters and mid and kind of the laggards. Most of that theory suggests that if you can get 15 to 20% of everyone excited, you can move something through a whole culture. And so very often we're stuck at the 5%. We've got the core of folks, but we're not getting further than that. And so really it is ultimately about broadening that tent, about doing things that engage more people, about making this seem fun and appealing in different ways, showing people what's in it for them. A lot of our programs, a big piece of the focus is on how people can benefit in their personal lives as well as their professional lives. We need something in it for them to get them to really come to that place. I think another piece that's really important is seeing that leadership at the top walking the talk. Certainly in our experience, programs are most effective when leaders participate with rank and file employees and everyone is part of adopting new practices and acknowledging which practices are hard for them to adopt. And then I would say maybe the other thing is just thinking about all of the simple things you can do to make it easier for people to do the right thing. And I think we've talked about this in other webinars at points. Sometimes we have a tendency to think if people were really committed, they would do it even though it's hard. And that's just unrealistic. What we need to do is really be thoughtful about how do we make it as easy as possible for people to do the right things. So if I want you to recycle, I need to put bins next to each other. I need to label them clearly. I need to do everything possible to make it easy for you to do the right thing. Certain kinds of nudges or reminders might be helpful to help you remember to turn things off. It really does matter, though, if you're acknowledging people who are doing the right thing, other people will switch their practices to be part of that acknowledged group. Never underestimate the power of positive reinforcement. I think so often it surprises people how really powerful that is. And maybe with that, I am not seeing more questions. So you've got my contact information. As always, thanks for joining us today. It was a fun discussion, and I look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Thanks for all you do to make sustainability happen out there in the broader world, and have a great week.